for each session.
Yes, that's the new plan.
Let me get off here. Let me turn this off.
All right. Did you want us to do a little bit of introduction? I don't want to spend too much time, but I'm Craig Moro. I'm the minister of Y East UU congregation in Portland, Oregon, the heart of wokeness. And I've also been minister of a number of Northwest congregations. I've been involved with UU since about 1969, when a friend and I drove the float at a 4th of July parade. We drove a protest float. And as we left the downtown area, our float, the little minivan, was stoned. When we look back, we seem to see parents directing kids to throw stones. Can't be sure of that, but that's what it looked like, because our van said things like, "America, love it and change it." So I had sort of a baptism by fire. And I maybe, Todd, you want to say a word about yourself?
Yeah, I think folks know me already for the most part. I'm in Spokane, Washington. I've been the minister here for 11 years, over 11 years now. And I came here from Louisville, where I was a minister at a Unitarian church for 12 years. And also that's where I made the change from being a Southern Baptist to a Unitarian, and had about 16 years of a career in television news, and then later corporate video production as well. But I'm a Unitarian Universalist largely because I believe in its historic values, in the freedom of expression, the freedom of speech. I believe in our extreme tolerance of, especially of others with other ideas, and that shouldn't get in the way of our friendship. And I believe in the use of reason and empiricism in our attempt to explain what our world is about. So that's why I'm a Unitarian, and that's why I'm still in the fight to preserve those values.
Great. Well, Todd, that's just completely inadequate. I recently was in a conversation with one of my former congregations about becoming their minister emeritus, and the young minister who had signed was one of those who signed the letter slandering Todd. Thought this would be a great opportunity to put me on trial for supporting Todd. One of the things I did was to send a link to a video. And this is where Todd was inadequate in his presentation of himself. I found a video online that shows Todd in Louisville after he had been fired for his support for LGBTQ rights. One of the things in the letter against Todd was saying how he'd written a homophobic and transphobic book. And I just have to marvel at his restraint to have never brought up that video in the course of this discussion, because that was right on a television station. So there was our transphobic friend losing a large portion of his income and putting his family at economic risk for supporting the rights of the people he's supposed to be to hate. So anyway, thank you, sir. You are a master of restraint.
Yeah. Thank you. Hey, that put me into full-time ministry.
Very good. Very good. Well, I want to start by, saying, repeating something some of you might have heard, sort of my praise, if you will, of the power of the 7 principles that we currently have. And then I want to segue and I'm going to mention accountability and covenant, and give Todd some time. He's done some beautiful work on covenant. And then come back to some concrete calls for concrete action in the face of our current situation. So let me just launch right in with this. All Unitarian Universalists oppose bigotry and discrimination in every form. That's just true. We reject any and all hierarchies of human beings based on physical characteristics. We reject any and all moral hierarchies based on sexual identity or preference, national origin, language, or religious affiliation. We reject the notion that the needs of the human species justify degradation of the natural environment at the expense of other species or the non-organic structures of that environment. We revere beauty as something far deeper than physical appearance, and we celebrate freedom. We make all of this plain, not through negative statements, but not by taking a hostile stance, but by a covenant to affirm and promote 7 clear, positive principles. The inherent worth and dignity of every person. Justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. Acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations. A free and responsible search for truth and meaning. The rights of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and in the society at large. The goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. Respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. These principles serve as 7 guiding stars, but stars are more than points of distant light. They have heat and mass and gravity. They pull us towards themselves while they also radiate power towards us, through us, and beyond us, just like our sun does. Their pull and their penetration are one, indivisible, irresistible. Why would a religious movement ask or settle for less than this? Each of these 7 principles clearly meets the dictionary definition of a principle. Principle, noun, a fundamental truth or proposition that serves as the foundation for a system of belief or behavior, or for a chain of reasoning, a rule or belief governing one's personal behavior. Principles should be as close to forever and always in their scope and intent as we limited human beings can manage to put into words. They should also be easy to understand, even for those who may not agree with them completely or at all. Ours move in a beautiful arc from the individual to society, onto the cosmos and back again. An open, expanding circle that includes everyone and everything. They end at the right moment, leaving us in reverent silence with the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. But here's the language of what's being proposed as an 8th UU principle. Once again, I don't want to bore you, but a couple things I want to point out. We will journey together toward spiritual wholeness because we're all broken. Well, anyway, we'll journey together toward spiritual wholeness by building a diverse, multicultural, beloved community in capital letters, which Dr. King never used when he used that phrase, beloved community. Not in anything I've been able to find, never used capital letters. Multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. And just holding for a moment on that capitalization, though that's the sort of capitalization that's often reserved for, well, people who've read the Bible a lot. What do you see with 2 capitals in a row? Lord God, the Lord God, right? But this sort of capitalization mid-sentence doesn't occur in the rest of our principles. And I want you to just take note of that. Anyway, this 8th principle is clearly not a principle. Longer than the first 3 principles combined. It's a policy or mission statement that calls for active participation in an ongoing conflict between, among, and even within persons. All of our current 7 principles deny any real or lasting basis for such a conflict, saying in effect, we're all one. That which says otherwise is a fiction. Our differences matter less than what connects us. The language of the proposed 8th principle commits Unitarian Universalists to an endless war on a racism that's conceived as both an enemy without and an enemy within. Of course, soldiers in a war need discipline. The command to accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions suggests the possibility of disciplinary measures to be enacted against those who do not or will not participate. We see this happening now in the recent silencing and punishment of ministers like Todd and Richard Davis, who conscientiously object to this militarizing spirit. The idea of being accountable for the sincerity or effectiveness of our actions, thoughts, or feelings as ordered participants in an ongoing conflict is unprecedented in Unitarian Universalism. To whom, what must we make such an accounting? We've talked about this a bit, right? Under threat of what sanctions, punishments, or other discipline? Who makes the determination about what is racism or in what or where or whom we find it? each individual UU? Or will there be a local panel of judges, or maybe a traveling panel of judges? One thing we can be sure of is that their judgments, whoever they are, these two people to whom we will be accountable, is that their judgments will be expressed in terms of what? Of covenant. You're going to be called, you're going to be told you're in covenant or out of covenant, right? That's the new break in the law language. And we're being told that covenant has always been a central overarching concern of our Unitarian, Universalist, and later UU traditions. And at this time, I'd like to invite Todd to share some of his thoughts on this idea of covenant and how it's being used today. Still muted, Todd. Todd, you got to unmute. There we go.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm sorry. I've had documents up and everything as well, but I just was thanking you, Craig. It's great to work with you on this. I've appreciated all your support and your wisdom over these past 3 years. It's been great working with you and getting to know you. So I think that the term covenant really plays into this, because this principle is not, as Craig noted, it's not really a principle, as many of you have noted. Really, it's a paragraph disguised as a compound sentence. It's 29 words compared to most that are under 12, many of which are under 10. A few of them 6 and 7 words long. So it's also not principled. It's dogmatic because of that word accountability. And you know, I would also say that it is really meant to be the covenant. It's not an eighth principle. It's the overarching principle, or if you will, the overarching dogmatic principle. So for example, let me bring up my notes here. For example, the Article 2 Commission, for those of you who know what Article 2 is, it is the article in the UUA bylaws that contains those 7 principles to which this 8th overarching principle will be added should it pass, which I'm guessing it will. Anyway, there was an article last year, I believe it was, published by the Article 2 Commission. And that's charged with, you know, recommending changes to the Article 2. And they ask in this article, it was titled "Love is a Common Theological Core." They begin by asking what lies beneath the principles on which a commission can re-envision and re-articulate the ideas that are expressed currently in our existing principles and include potentially other ideas put forth to be considered for that restated covenant. Now, that's just about as confusing as the 8th principle itself, a pretty convoluted sentence. But what they're really saying is, you know, what is a principle we can use to rewrite and reinterpret what these 7 principles mean? And they're saying it's love. Love is our common theological core. Well, I would say that that's BS. Freedom is our common theological core. The freedom to speak, the freedom to be with each other, the freedom to have our own ideas and our own ways and still be respectful and actually be friends and be able to work together towards our common goals. So I would disagree with this fundamentally to begin with, but the article goes on to give examples of what some of these principles would be like if interpreted through this common theological core of love. Now, remember that love for the neo-racist, as Finley calls them, means not harming anybody by saying something they disagree with, right? If you say something someone disagrees with, you have harmed them, and that's not loving. So that's what we'll be held accountable for. So the one I love here says, let's see if I can find it. Where is it? I want to quote it perfectly. So it says, regarding the fourth principle, right? A free and responsible search for truth and meaning. It is recommending that we change it to, we discern an accountable love in our call for a responsible search for truth and meaning. Right? We discern an accountable love. Now think about that. It's no longer a free and responsible search for meaning, it's accountable love. So you have to come, no matter where you end up on the end of the journey, it better be a loving answer by their definition, meaning a place where you don't harm anybody by saying things they disagree with. So we discern an accountable love. Have you ever heard this term accountable love before? Right? We've heard unconditional love, which is what free and responsible search for truth and meaning should be. Free means unconditional. And I've heard of tough love, which was the idea the fundamentalist Christians came up with, decades ago to justify punishing teenagers. So I'm not sure what accountable love is, but that is an idea of where we're going. So if we trace this back to the sermon, the sermon by Berry Street lecture, actually by Reverend Frederick Muir, that really said some radical things that have become the blueprint for the direction the UUA is taking. And in short, he argues that Unitarian Universalism is founded upon a trinity of errors. A trinity of errors, and those are individualism, exceptionalism, which means standing out in a crowd. You don't get to stand out. We're all equals, and equals means we're exactly the same. And our allergy to authority, our anti-authoritarianism. These are the trinity of errors upon which our white supremacist, our terrible white supremacist religion has been founded upon fundamentally flawed principles that they are going to rid us of. The antidote for these errors is what he calls covenant. Covenant. And by becoming a covenantal religion rather than a membership organization with autonomous member congregations, we become a covenantal religion. And so he said in his lecture, in this move from the I church, the selfish church, the individual church, to beloved community, capitalized like Lord God, as Craig points out, we will move beyond these trinity of errors to a beloved community. And in this process, I'm quoting directly now, we will create something that has eluded Unitarian Universalism, a doctrine of church, an ecclesiology that is grounded in congregational justice making, a doctrine of church that will guide and sustain us as we become the religion we and others know we can be. So it's an intentional call for us to become a covenantal religion, and this eighth principle is the covenant, really a dogma disguised as a covenant that we will be held accountable for. Now, let me just wrap up by talking about some of the examples of how this term covenant is being used. And by the way, we've never been a covenantal religion. This is new. They called for it for the first time in 2015. The UUA put together a committee on recovenanting that would require churches to recovenant every couple of years by a vote of the congregation and to prove how they are upholding the covenant. That never did make it before the delegates. And I think it's because, one, it probably wouldn't fly. And two, they're just decided, let's just start calling it a covenantal religion. Let's just pretend we're already there. Why go through a vote of the body? We'll just shift our definition of ourselves from being a liberal religion, a free religion, to a covenantal one. So, for example, the day after the General Assembly in 2019, after I'd been banned, I received an email. Really, it's on the last day when it was too late for me to come back if I wanted to, but they said, you're welcome to participate in General Assembly. This is because they'd received criticism for banning me. After you have entered into an agreement with us about how you will uphold the covenantal commitments of our community at GA. I didn't join by a covenant. I paid a fee to get in. A month later, I was censured by the UU Ministers Association. It says, as the continental leadership of the UU Ministers Association, our responsibility is to uphold our values and our covenant. We believe you have broken covenant. We write this letter to ask you to seek understanding of the harm that has been done and the work toward restoration. We would welcome that opportunity to help guide and support a public process of restoration in which we expect would foster widespread learning about what it means to be a covenantal faith. When an attorney wrote to the UUMA board asking them why they hadn't notified me of any formal grievance before taking such action, they eventually responded saying, the board is not attempting to resolve a formal grievance, but rather inviting Reverend Dr. Eklof into a religious process of covenantal repair. When my good officer, Reverend Richard Davis, made a similar inquiry, as well as asking for specific language about the covenant I'm accused of violating, they only replied, we are a covenantal faith. As such, we, the Board of Trustees of the UUMA, are first and foremost responsible to the covenant of our organization. That covenant was voted on by the membership in 2009 and is available in the covenant section of our UUMA guidelines. Of course, if you read that thing that was voted on, it has no bearing on my book or anything that I said in it. In March of 2018, after having also publicly expressed concerns about the Unitarian Universalist Association's counterproductive and illiberal approach to addressing racism, Reverend Richard Trudeau, who's of course with us guiding our work today, also received a letter of censure. Keep in mind, this was before me, right? This was a year before me. Stating the UUMA Board of Trustees voted to issue a letter of censure against you for conduct that violates our covenant and our code of conduct. After Reverend Richard Davis, my good officer, gave a sermon expressing similar concerns, he too received a letter from the UU Ministers Association asking for a meeting and explaining in part, we believe we share the same goal, though through learning, discernment, and repair of relationship and restoration of covenant. Last year, the Reverend Kate Rohde, a longtime and respected activist UU minister, was contacted by the Ministers Association and told she was out of covenant for comments she made on social media and told she could get back into covenant if she agreed not to talk about certain issues or to certain persons online. She declined to cooperate and was eventually stripped of her credentials. In March 2020, to Frank Casper and Jake Kiskell, who wrote their book Used to Be UU about the decline of democracy in our religion, they had asked for a booth space at the GA, which it had initially been approved, but they got the UUA got a bunch of emails, including one like this, that said the idea that someone can get an exhibitor booth to promote said book seems very out of covenant to me. If their booth is approved, it would make me feel very uncomfortable and many other people as well. So they, of course, denied them the space at the General Assembly. I could just go on and on with these examples. I will end up boring you because I've got two pages of this kind of nonsense. But what I really want to do is use the opportunity, use these examples just as a way of pointing out what really is going on here. This is a shift to turn our religion into a traditional dogmatic religion called for in Reverend Frederick Muir's blueprint to help cure us of our errors, which many of us would consider our strengths, our theological strengths, by creating a covenant. And that covenant is something we will be held accountable for. And that covenant is really this eighth principle, which is going to require the seven principles that so many of us like just the way they are to be reinterpreted through this lens of accountable love. Free and responsible. So yeah, of course you're free and responsible as long as you end up in the right place. worth and dignity of every person? Of course you have worth and dignity as a person, unless you have the wrong ideas. And that has been bared out in my case, as Reverend Trudeau's case, as well as many other ministers and UUs, as you're finding out in your congregations. So I think that is really the important connection between covenant and the proposed overarching 8th unprincipled paragraph.
Well, thank you so much, Todd. Really a very brilliant presentation and an alert. Some things, some of these documents that Todd's referring to, not all people who aren't ministers would have seen, right? So some of this stuff has been very hidden from most UUs, the people who are the UU movement. The regular people who are not being treated with any kind of respect for intelligence or goodness or decency. I just want to quickly, before going on and getting back to covenant, I want to talk a little bit about love. And this is although many of you have probably seen the 300 white ministers letter to Todd. You probably haven't seen the preamble, the note that accompanied it, that reached, this is the note, this is the cover note on that, this search for more people to sign the letter condemning Todd for the book they hadn't read, right? This is the cover note that came along with that. UUs, please take a moment and read this letter signed by more than 300 white UU ministers in response to one of our own colleagues publishing and distributing a racist, transphobic, sexist treatise while we were at General Assembly. It's one of many responses, and they all declare that the views espoused in this publication are not representative of who we want to be as UUs. Read these, right? Read the letter, but please do not go out and purchase this book out of curiosity. Trust the hundreds of people who've seen it, especially our siblings of color and our trans kin who have been hurt by this. It's bad. This came out the day the book appeared. The person who sent this note has been rewarded with a position as one of the directors of the UUA's Side with Love office. So I think that tells us a little bit about what's meant by love is very different than what a lot of us might understand by love.
Craig, can I point out just two more things too? One is to note that it says, trust those of us who've seen it, not those of us who've read it. Right?
Exactly. Exactly.
And secondly, the person who wrote that is, I don't know, partners or maybe married to the person that the Ministerial Fellowship Committee assigned to investigate the complaint against me. And that person is among those those 38 ministers of color who signed a letter calling my, the day after my book came out, calling myself and the book racist, homophobic, transphobic, ableist, and classist. And one of the reasons I refused to participate in their tribunal is because they would not guarantee that I'd have a fair chance. But so the first part of this couple wrote this statement soliciting signatures to a letter about a book none of them had read, condemning it and me, and the other had published the very first letter calling me and my book all of these things without ever citing an example. So this is the love. And then the UUA dares to put those people in charge of trying me.
Thanks so much. I did not know about that intense personal relationship between those two. And again, these are things that you would not tend to know if you weren't a minister. Anyway, thanks so much for hearing it. But this is history being made, and we see how interactions between just a couple of people can have so much impact, right, on the rest of us. So here I want to make now, I want to shift over to a call for action. Outside of the individual congregational covenants that some UU groups have created, the only Unitarian Universalist covenant is our statement of principles, sources, and purposes, which starts, we, the member congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Association, covenant to affirm and promote. The word covenant is clearly used here. So these principles, purposes, and sources are a vital part of what makes us who we are. And they must only be changed after the deepest and fullest debate and discussion that we can manage. And that calls for a few, I think, process imperatives. The first is a return to a free UU press, a free press. Our fifth principle is the right of conscience and the use of democratic process within our congregations and in society at large. A free press is vital to that process. After the death of King John Sigismund, the first, last, and only Unitarian king, Catholic rulers tried to crush the early Unitarians by denying them access to the printing presses that they had used so skillfully. Some, like a nobleman named Andrea Eossi, responded by distributing handmade copies of hymns, sermons, and essays so that they could continue to speak and share their truth. Now imagine you're in a world of print already, and now all of a sudden you're seeing handwritten, hand-copied manuscripts again. It must have really gotten people's attention because the printing press was taken away from them, right? Well, anyway, these were more than pieces of paper. Paper with words is always more than paper. Now, I want to ask you, do you remember one of the first things that happened when you joined a UU congregation? Think about it for a moment. You got a subscription to the UU World Magazine. For decades, that more than anything else was your, quote, connection to the UUA. You had your congregation, but you had a sense there was this thing called the UUA, right? Your connection to the UUA and to its message and its meaning. That magazine was the concrete connection. The magazine had articles with different points of view and letters to the editor with an even wider range of viewpoints than the articles. Remember, this national, international, and even world connection came right along with your membership in a local congregation. You seemed to have entered an agreement, or dare we say a covenant, that you will be consulted and asked to contribute your thoughts and given a small but regular and reliable way to make that contribution, to say what's on your mind. The only true covenant is the one to which all parties agree. That's the only kind of covenant you can have. This covenant, the one that gives you a voice in the UU world, and I don't just mean the magazine, has been unaccountably broken. They've broken this covenant and they haven't said why. Well, recently, I found in my files an old 2004 copy of the UU World Magazine. And I noticed that it includes, let me find them. It's right after the, like in a lot of newspapers, it's right after you open it up. Letters to the editor, 1 page, 2 pages, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 pages of letters to the editor, mostly voicing courteous dissent from views expressed in earlier articles or proposals made by UUA leaders, while also offering thoughtful alternative views and proposals. Along with the dissenting and questioning articles that used to appear in the magazines, these letters provided a healthy representation of diverse viewpoints among our members. 7 pages. Take a look now at any recent copy of The World and try to find any letters to the editor, let alone a letter of dissent. Try to find even one word of disagreement with recent UU policy statements or executive actions. Dissenting opinions or alternative proposals from UU lay members now have no place in our official publications or our annual General Assembly. Our press has in effect been seized and turned over to the prosecution of the war that's reflected in the language of the 8th principle. I can't think of a more clear violation of our 5th UU principle, the rights of conscience and the use of democratic process. We see, as we see so clearly today in Russia, crackdowns on freedom of the press are quite common during times of war. In keeping with the UU leadership's current wartime stance, our press has been seized and our access to it has been denied, although our membership dues are still warmly welcomed during what has become a crackdown on free thought and discussion. We must demand that our press be returned to us and assert our right to speak freely at all UU assemblies. The second proposal involves informed universal voting on any change to our core documents, such as Article 2. Article 2, for those who might not know, that's the place in the bylaws where you find the principles, sources, and purposes. Right now, the proposed 8th principle is being pushed by UUA administrative officials who don't offer any real opportunity for discussion. Their so-called information page that you can go to online functions more as a promotion page that offers no real analysis and raises no serious questions. They're hoping to hustle the statement through to a General Assembly vote, like the one that Richard described, where everybody has to stand, everybody has to see how you're voting, right? Such votes, you should know, are generally cast by less than 1.3%, 1.3% of UU members. Changing our core principles is a momentous act that should not be the result of such slim participation. When I first moved to Oregon from Illinois, I was very impressed to witness this state's ballot initiative process, especially the opportunity to read detailed pro and con statements in the voter pamphlet. A lasting, if not permanent, change to the fundamental document of a religious movement like ours should never be made without a similar vigorous discussion, including thorough presentations both for and against and also about process. Nor should it be made without a well-informed vote from every member of every UU congregation. We must demand the distribution of such voters' pamphlets and that every UU have an opportunity to vote by secret ballot, not a public show of hands susceptible to the pressures of groupthink. And that's the end of my formal statement. And I think now is a good time for some questions. I saw one from Karen Brown about when the magazine changed. The big change came, well, actually Todd, one of Todd's controversial chapters in the Gadfly papers talks a bit about the kerfuffle of a UU that followed a UU World article. One which, before Todd goes into it, I had 3 members of my congregation say, "Did you say that article was so great? It was so helpful." And it was about trans people. But Todd, you know more about this than I do.
Yeah. You know, there was a couple of articles in the UU World. One, both of them, you know, on trans issues. One was written by an individual whose daughter was dating a trans person, and how even as an enlightened Unitarian, she kept flubbing the language and really talked about how important it was to try to get the language right and not, you know, not unintentionally offend trans people, which I thought was a fine statement. The other one was written by the trans ministers, and yet, you know, the response was that this was the most horrible article ever written because it was not written by a trans person, and there were calls for the editor to be fired. Susan Frederick Gray published an immediate apologies about all the harm it had caused. So that was really the first sign to me of the censorship when she let them know that she had ordered the editor to issue a public apology, which he did in the form of an article admitting the harm that he had caused. So we knew it was no longer a free magazine. But there were an awful lot of folks trying to write in and get letters to the editor expressing their concerns about how I'd been treated, but also about their concerns, the direction our religion is going. They had somewhere along the line published a policy or had established a policy after my book came out that my name could not be mentioned anywhere in their magazine. The only exception was when they disfellowshipped me. They were very happy to announce that little gem. But and I don't know why, but shortly after that, they just decided to get rid of the letters altogether. My suspicion is they were getting so many negative letters that they just decided it would be total hypocrisy if all they did was publish the positive ones. So they just got rid of them if they were getting any positive ones at all.
Thanks very much. That's a great thumbnail description of how the change, but the change was rapid. It was very, very sudden, and it was very, very complete. And now, of course, the UU World comes out. I think it's only going to be twice a year now. Twice, yeah. It had been 4, and I think before that had been bi-monthly for some years. So it's been reducing. So our voice has been getting smaller. You know.
Yeah.
Other questions? Yeah. From Bob and Pat.
Hi, Pat here.
Hi, Pat.
A couple of quick questions. I'm very new here, but Todd, it sounded like you were reading something that sounded like a possible revision of, I think it's Principle 4, about adding love on the top of this. I've been looking around to see if I could see any information about what's in process of the committee that's reviewing Article 2. Did you find that somewhere? Is any information out there about what the committee has done so far?
You know, the best place to find out about not the Article 2 committee, the committee on recovenanting is I have their reports in the appendices of my book, The Gadfly Affair. The Article 2 Commission is just something I've Googled to get various reports. Somebody sent me a link to this particular article, which caught my attention because of its redefinition of the fourth principle and this bizarre turn of phrase, accountable love, which is a bit of an oxymoron, really. That is an article I have. When I stop talking in a bit, I'll find it and put the link in the chat so you can get that article.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and then another little question is, I'd read at one point, poking around, that there was supposed to be a first vote on the proposed revisions to all of Article 2 in 2022. And then more recently, I read that there wouldn't be a vote till 2023. And I wonder if anybody knew anything about that. And does that indicate any maybe hopeful sign that there's problems with this? Or did I just perhaps misread something?
Campbell here. Dick Burkhart, who is our liaison to the UUA power structure, indicated that there was seemingly something was being delayed. There is some kind of a delay going on.
Yeah, there is delay. It's not really clear exactly why it's these delays. It's already 2 years late, and I think they plan to have a preliminary vote this year and a final vote next year. But now it looks like the preliminary vote won't occur for another year. They've got 155 congregations signed on. Paula Jones has wants 300 congregations signed on before they have the vote. So it looks like they're delaying until they have enough votes. There's this separate process of going around to the different congregations and trying to persuade them to vote for the eighth principle. In this process, it's supposed to be separate from the UUA itself. It's supposed to be a private endeavor, but it involves people like Paula Jones, who's on the Article 2 Commission. It's private and technically, but not actually. And when they go around to these different congregations, they present only one point of view, which is that you have to vote for this. And if there's opposition, it can be squashed by the local congregation, unless the minister or other people there are willing to allow opposition people to speak, which is pretty rare. Sometimes there will be opposition that's allowed to speak, but if it's very substantial, often they won't even ask for a vote because they're afraid of losing it. And so, and right now the Article 2 Commission technically is responsible for the eighth principle. But they have not done any programs since I think like last year on the eighth principle. None are scheduled. It's very clear they don't want any kind of negative feedback or even any kind of discussion. And they've said, oh, all the discussion this has been on the table for years, and we're done with it. We're just going to let it be promoted by this private group. And I think we should be out there complaining that people are finally looking at this and we need to talk about it. And the Article 2 Commission is really derelict in not providing any means of talking about it.
Yeah, that's the real issue, that I have with what's going on right now. We don't talk to each other. I mean, I'm personally not even somebody that says, oh, critical race hypothesis, because it's a hypothesis, not a theory. Critical race hypothesis should go away. I say, let's talk about it. Maybe by questioning it, we will iron out something even better. We will make it better than what it is by questioning its flaws. But we're not allowed to. We're not allowed to, put letters in our denominational newsletter, so to speak. We're not allowed to express dissent or write books without getting disfellowshipped or condemned. We're not allowed to talk about the things they want us to vote on without any conversation whatsoever. By the way, that's what happened in Canada. It passed in Canada, and it passed without any conversation. It just appeared on the ballot. And when it was pointed out that the bylaws say that they're required to give at least 3 weeks notice before something ends up on the ballot, they just said, well, we suspended the rules.
Yeah, there we go.
So, yeah. So this is what I think they want to do with this as well. And it's probably not working out. I think to the main point of the question is that, there is growing awareness. And I monitor it by the number of books I sell, which isn't many, but I have to say I probably continue after 3 years to sell 1 to 2 books on average a day to a very niche market, right? So this means people keep waking up and keep taking an interest and keep trying to figure out how do we frame what's going on? How do we understand what's happening? And the UUA is continuing to get mounting pushback against the direction they're taking. So things may look very different in 2023, because that's how change happens. It's exponential, right? It goes with 1 or 2 ministers like Richard Trudeau and Todd Eklof saying, hey, something's weird here. And then people start slowly waking up, and there becomes this force, this exponential force for change. So I think if we can keep the pressure on, we may actually be able to see this eighth principle, as it's called, either go away or becoming something valuable, like Finley's talking about and Craig has talked about. What a wonderful mission statement for all of us to try to achieve, right?
Todd, how do we get our message out to more people that we need to really talk about this, get the discussion going? It seems like they blocked access to most congregations or whatever.
Yeah, it's been very hard. I'm sorry. Beverly was waving her hand. Maybe she has a better.
Joyce Francis is next in line, so
Yeah.
she should be, then Beverly's.
Oh, okay.
Thanks for helping with that.
So I think we just keep doing what we're doing. They have tried to block our democratic processes, but we keep writing books. Groups like this are meeting and getting the word out. My books keep selling, and I get new congregations I've not heard of, new individuals I've not heard from, writing me every week saying, this is bothering me. I've noticed it going on. Thanks for what you're doing. This kind of stuff. So I think, slowly it's just going out word of mouth through our congregations, through members in our congregations.
Thanks, Ted.
Joyce, you're next.
Joyce? Yeah.
Thank you. One quick thing. I would love to know how to get my hands on that message that went out soliciting more censure of Todd and saying, don't buy the book, just sign here. If anybody can show me how I can get my hands on that, I would love it. Another is this concept that we covenant love. I'm not sure I can covenant to love everybody in my fellowship. I'm pretty sure I can't. I'll work on it, but I've encountered recently through the Baha'i community here this concept of amity. They have a race amity project that I'm very attracted to. And so I think I can covenant amity, but not love. So that's another thought. And lastly, here in our fellowship, we're about to have a vote on the 8th principle after endless, Paula Jones and other such presentations from the pulpit. At the moment, we have 4 of, I think, 8 bulletin boards in our fellowship covered with rah, 8th principle. And so several of us are really despairing and feeling like there's no hope here. And I wonder at many of you why you've spent, what keeps you from walking away and saying, these people have gone off the deep end and I can't work with them anymore. Let me just go create something new. You sound like you're not ready. I'm curious, do you have faith that it will change? What is it that keeps you fighting? I'm wearing out.
I'd love to respond to that, but I want to give Craig an opportunity first because I'm sure he is as well.
What keeps you going? Gosh, one of the things, some of the language that's been used around the 8th principle, I have found very insulting from a specific point of view. If you listen to and read the writings of a lot of our woke ministers, they're not all young, but a lot of them are young, you will often find an almost teary-eyed, almost drooling praise for, oh, I heard from some elder. And that elder is always the elder of another tradition. Oh, as a Native American elder, as an African elder, et cetera, et cetera. And yet the elders of our tradition, people who've been in this for decades, are treated with disrespect as if you don't get to be an elder, right? So one of the things that is missing along here is no one consulted with the elders about what we think. I am not obsolete. I have been trying throughout my career to help build an international kind of Unitarian Universalism. I helped to start a project to get Unitarian Universalism translated into other languages, particularly so-called exotic languages, because I think we need to have a world outlook. But anyway, I'm an elder. So that's been part of it. It's just been doggedness, just a grumpy old man. Doggedness is one of the things that's kept me going as an elder. But remember, if you've been in this for decades, you are an elder, and elders should be accounted. And these little babies who drool at the word elder, if the person happens to be a Lakota, should learn to look around and see who the elders are around them.
Yeah, I think that's a really great response as well, and a part of my response would be the same thing. I'm here and I'm responsible to my calling as a Unitarian Universalist minister. So I'm doing this, but the bigger reason for me is I've had so much support since my book came out in 2019, including from groups like this. This is where Finley called me up that weekend and said, "Hey man, we're here for you." My own congregation went through hell as the UUA was working behind the scenes to try to oust me, and they really came to the rescue, if you will, and kept me despite a very serious push to have me removed. And I don't know what's going to happen to them once I do go. Eventually I will. I don't know where they're going to get a minister worthy of this 133-year-old pulpit that Dietrich was in, and so I feel this obligation. I have things in my life that I'm attracted to. I mean, things that are brighter, interests that I love and I would love to pursue and spend a part of my life, the last part of my life pursuing those, and they're completely outside of UUism and the ministry. And it is like a light, you know, it's warm, it's positive, it's stuff that I love doing. And yet I am the person who sort of created this mess in a way. And I am a person who can impact the situation more than most because of the notoriety and notoriousness that I have gained in the UUA over this incident. So if there is, you know, I have a voice in the conversation right now, more than many do. So for me to leave, even though I've had those same sentiments, you know, like what am I doing here? I don't need this shit in my life. There's a lot of positive things going on. It was good while it lasted, but right now I feel I feel hope. I see things moving, shifting. So I wouldn't do it if I didn't have hope that we could make a difference. But fundamentally, I feel a sense of responsibility. That these are my values, these are the virtues. This is the reason I'm a Unitarian Universalist, is because I believe in promoting these in the world. And if we can prevent this religion from going away, the world will be better for it. So I'm staying in for now.
Okay, thank you. Beverly, you're
Beverly.
up.
Hope you're muted, Beverly.
Unmute.
There you go.
So you're asking, what can we do? And so I was asking that question too. And so what I decided to do was invite all of the churches in my state of Indiana. I'm a minister at the Kokomo, Indiana church. So I've sent out an invitation to all of the UU churches in Indiana to come together for a weekend of discernment, and it's happening next weekend because of that concern of mine that we're not talking to each other. Our district was eliminated in favor of a 13-state region, which will be meeting in 2 weeks, in 3 weeks from now, for 4 hours on Zoom. That's how many people are going to get to talk to each other during that time. So I said, let's bring anyone who wants to come from all the states in Indiana to Kokomo, either in person or by Zoom, and have a chance to talk about our concerns, talk about our joys and everything. And so I have a list, and we are getting responses from various churches. And I also then sent a message to the leaders of the region saying, you know, this is what we're doing. Here's our agenda, what we're going to be giving people the opportunity to do. And this invitation, I said, was from the Kokomo church with the in cooperation with UUMUAC. And so the response from the region was that because UMUAC is out of covenant, out of covenant, was it? With
Right relations.
Oh, yeah, out of right relations with UUA and with the region, which we didn't realize that. No one could come for that. Besides the fact that it was sort of short notice, but you know, coming by Zoom for a few minutes wouldn't be too hard at short notice. But, he assured me that they could not participate because of that reason. And so, but said, would you like to meet and talk about this? And so I checked with other UMUAC folks to see if they would like to do that, and got a response, yes, of course. And so I wrote back to him. This is a person who I was at seminary with at Meadville Lombard about 12 years ago. So I know this person and I liked him there. Apart from his, I'm a pacifist, and he was strongly involved with chaplaincy in the military. So we do have some issues, but I still like him. But so I wrote back, yes, let's talk, for heaven's sakes. I think that's been the problem for 3 years, is that we don't get a chance to talk about these things, and we just get sent away into the corner that we can't interact with you. And so we'll see. So I said, how do you propose? What do you want to do first? So we're waiting for a response back from district. He's one of the district leads. And so this is 13 states here in the middle, it's Mid-America region, 13 states here in the middle of the country. And so after I was kind of shut down at that national meeting about social witness, mind you, because I said, shouldn't we be calling this proposed principle? You know, I just decided, okay, the church is going to split. I mean, there's really no, really no other answer, because these people are just so opposed to what I understand as Unitarian Universalism. And so I guess what I think, someone was saying to me, oh yeah, but if you split off, they won't give you any money. What I'm saying is, if they want a doctrinal religion, they should split off. We are Unitarian Universalists, and we always have been. And if they want a different kind of religion that prescribes all the things you have to believe and what words you can and can't say, then they need to split off and make their own religion. And you know, good luck to you, and we wish you well. And so go do your religion. And so one of the things I want to do at our weekend of discernment next weekend here in Indiana is to write a proposal or some sort of statement to take to our regional meeting 2 weeks later on the 30th, and then hopefully on to Portland, Oregon, and let Craig help us stand up and state our proposal from the Midwest, at least from Indiana or from Kokomo, if there are other churches that have sent notes to say, oh, this is so needed. I mean, that's the message I'm getting from people. I'm sure that many of the churches members of the other churches have not been given the opportunity to even know that this is happening. And so I'm not sure how many churches actually know it's happening. And so we can't really judge from if people are coming from churches or not, whether those churches have a certain mindset. But I'm just happy that we're getting any people to come get together and talk about the issues, and then take something to district conference on the 30th, and then on to GA in Portland in June. And I was a little upset just recently when I saw some national thing is happening on the 30th. And I'm thinking, well, if this is a huge region's annual meeting on April 30th, why would anything else be scheduled for April 30th unless they don't want us to be there at one or the other? So that's my rant.
Thank you, Beverly. Finley.
Comrades in the struggle, there are two kinds of schisms. One which is deliberately provoked, to create a situation, or one that is invoked because the situation itself is untenable. In 1914, the Second International met in London to decide what they're going to do about World War I. And the spirit of the proposal was that all socialist parties would not support any of their national entities in the coming war. They saw it as an imperialist war. And the comrades from Germany said, we'll definitely not support the upcoming war. This was in July, right before August, and of course, everything went down. And sure enough, the nationalism trumped the internationalism, and the French socialists supported France, the German socialists supported Germany, et cetera, et cetera. The only group that stood tall on not supporting their country was the so-called Bolsheviks. That schism split the international at that time, and a third international will eventually be formed. Now, the schism is coming, and I think Beverly just, bless her heart, laid out very strongly how it'll work. We will be the Unitarian Universalist Association of Congregations. They will be a neo-racist cabal with lots of money, but no true commitment people. Or if they have committed people, they're unfortunately duped. The schism, we're not gonna leave. Many times I'm tempted to resign from First Unitarian Church. I just went through another trial. Somebody pointed out, you're the only Black person, only person who's been about 4 or 5 trials, and each time they have to back away from just throwing me out. So one person said, you know, you could really help our church if you were to resign, because once we get you out the way, then we can really deal with the problems of the church. But so long as you're there, you're sort of like in the way. I said, well, that's one way to get rid of me, and that's to take me to trial before the congregation. So we're not resigning, we're not walking away. It's tough, Sister Francis, it's tough to be there, but hang tough and vote no. Stand up and vote no. And if they say, well, if you vote no, we're expelling you from the church, they say, good, you're expelling me, but I'm not walking away, and I'm taking 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 people with us. We have a comrade already now in Florida. He had to walk away from his church. He couldn't stand the pressure. He's setting up a new house fellowship. The house fellowships may be our future for now, but we are the heart of Unitarian Universalism. And of course, we cannot create a new UUAC. That's not what UUMUAC is about. But we can certainly encourage people to recognize that how the race issue would be used to destroy our 5,000 or 10,000 year history of religious commitment. So hang tough, do tough, and then get ready to form a house church.
Thank you, brother. David.
I really like what Beverly had to say. I stay because I'm not a minister, and I'm not any kind of notable person. I don't make big donations. I can't. And if I were to leave, I'd leave on my own. You know, if I didn't want to fight this, I'd be on my own. There'd be nowhere else to go. There's nothing else anywhere like you used to be. And I'd just be unchurched again. And I hadn't been unchurched for 30 years. I don't know what I'd do. So I'm here for the fight because of that. And this is the only corner of UUism that I've found any support for what I believe UU is. And I think there's a split coming, but I think we're being colonized. You know, just like England and France sent all those ships over to America. We've got a bunch of ex-Baptist and evangelical and Black church folks reshaping the UU religion to be what they wanted and couldn't find, you know, and so it's become authoritarian, and it's become about dogma, and it's become about original sin of being white.
David, I did a sermon not too long ago called the the colonization of America's liberal religion or something to that
Oh, my
effect.
goodness,
So,
I wish I'd heard that. Maybe
yeah.
you send me a link.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you sticking around. I'm glad you found a group that can still offer you, like me, a glimmer of hope. Let's go on to Marie now, who's been also waiting patiently.
For a long time, yes.
Well, I have been an activist for the good part of my life, and I ran into Black nationalists. I live in Chicago, and I have been fighting the idea of Black nationalists throughout my activism. So that's one of the reasons that I am very skeptical about the proposed eighth principle, because it just reminds me of things that happened in Chicago when a group of people, a group of Black nationalists got the power, and they were able to get money from a lot of different companies in Chicago. And so that's one of the reasons why I'm so skeptical, because it seems to me that instead of fighting racism, that's been my history of fighting racism, the people who have put forward the proposed eighth principle, they come out of part of that Black nationalist movement a long time ago. And what seems to me is that they have weaponized racism to get money from people who are afraid to be called racist. One of the things that I did run into early on when Black Unitarian Universalists first got together, and they were given money for, actually the GA had gave them money to give to Black people to come to the General Assembly. And I had already been to one of their Black convening meetings. I think it was in Cleveland. And I spoke at that. And I mentioned that, I can't remember exactly what I said, but I did say that I didn't agree with some of their policies and whatever else I had to say. But then later on, when I applied for the scholarship to go to GA, one of the leaders of the Black convening told me that she was so surprised that I was asking for money and I didn't support Blue. So, I mean, that further, made me think that they are not really genuine, that they are so similar to the people that I have been fighting against most of my life, the Black nationalists. So, I mean, I know that there are some people who may honestly be real and, or think that this is the way to go.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
I question the leadership, especially those who were part of the Black Empowerment movement. And because they are their elders, the Black Empowerment movement. I remember, I can't remember exactly what GA it was, but there's this one person, I think his name is Henry Howard. That used to be his name, that he's changed his name now to something that I can't pronounce. Said, after they were given the $5.3 million, he mentioned the fact that they had been fighting so long and finally they have gotten what they wanted. So, I mean, and that's one of the reasons that, you know, I just don't trust that they're honest. And with this 8th principle, I think the language is very ambiguous, but that's also why I just don't trust it.
Yeah, Marie, if I can just interject here, I think you're right. They can't be trusted. And I don't think that many of them are even maliciously untrustworthy. They're not honest with themselves about their true motives. But every righteous, every holy war needs a righteous cause. And it is, you know, racism is the perfect one for this time and age. So by saying that you're against our version of anti-racism work, therefore you're a racist, is a powerful way to shut people down. So I mean, the money is certainly a big part of it, but I think the power is also a part of it. There's power in controlling the message. That's why colonizers always control the language first, right? They go in and prohibit the indigenous language from being spoken. Right now, we're being prohibited from allowing our indigenous language as Unitarian Universalists to be spoken, which appeals to our freedom and our ability to dissent and our ability to listen to each other, those sort of things. We can't talk about that anymore because that's all white supremacy culture. We're racist if we talk about those things. If we talk about reason and logic, that's racist. If we talk about freedom of speech, that's a classic form of oppression. We have documented letters condemning me saying these things. So I think you hit on a really good point about the benefit, you know, of sort of running on an anti-racist ticket, which is what they're sort of doing right now, is trying to gain control of this religion. The real question is, you know, is this split going to result in us walking away from all that money and the institution, and them keeping it, or vice versa? What happened in my church was the opposite, right? We had a small cabal here. The majority rose up and said, no, we're not going to do this. They took it over, and that group was gone the next day, never showed their faces again, probably because they were embarrassed. And I think if we could do that here, the same thing would happen. These folks would go, they'd be the victims, they'd leave as victims who were betrayed by their white supremacist organization, but they'd still be gone, which would be great. Now, that's one approach we've not talked about yet. You know, we missed a really big opportunity. I'm kicking myself for not thinking about it sooner. There are 4 board positions up in 2022, 4 board positions. We should have, and the deadline is, you know, April 29th, I think, April 30th. So, you know, if we could have just loaded that slate, you know, find 8, 10, 16 people, whatever, and just had so many people running for those open seats. And if we do this over a period of 3, 4, 5 years, we can regain control of the institution. That's how you take an institution over. That's how this institution was taken over. We need to really begin strategically now thinking politically about how we regain control of our institution. And we're unfortunately, again, missing a huge opportunity right now. Unfortunately, it's too late. I wasn't bright enough to be considering it, but it's on my radar now.
The last thing I want to say is that I intend to stay in. I mean, sometimes I feel like it burned out, and what I do when I feel that way, I kind of get away from everything else. In fact, one of the reasons I had been, you know, I had taken a leave, but I decided that I would be active around this proposed 8th principle. So, I mean, sometimes it's not easy. Sometimes you just get totally overwhelmed. But I think that when that happens, just step back a little. That's what I did.
Well, thank you. So glad that you're here. And looks like we've got, are you saying 5 minutes, Richard? Oh, and maybe it's a high five. I don't know. But go ahead, Richard. I know Dr. Michael's waiting, but
Michael's first. Let Michael talk, but then I want to talk. Yeah.
Okay.
I need to come back down here. So in answer to the question, why do we stay? Most of you know that those of us in Austin who are here didn't stay and split from our church here just about 2 years ago and formed our own unaffiliated, independent Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. And we're happily building that until about 4 months ago when we got a cease and desist letter from the UUA requiring that we stop using the words Unitarian Universalist or referring to the 7 principles. We conferred with an attorney who told us we really didn't stand a chance of defeating that. So we have been in the process of somehow trying to hold on to our individual identifications as Unitarian Universalists without being able to publicly call ourselves a Unitarian Universalist organization under threat of lawsuit. And honestly, although I think we've done a yeoman's job of doing that, and Greg and David and Carol are here with me to attest to that. Revisiting this issue about the 8th principle and the 7 principles today, I'm feeling a grief about the loss of my identity about that, more so than I had before today. So the answer to the question is, the part of me would love to come back into the Unitarian Universalist movement, at least to publicly call myself that, but I am now prevented from doing that by the same forces as have harmed other people.
Yeah, well, really, really so sorry for that. That was an outrage, unprecedented, and I think but it is precedent setting. This is the plan the UUA has with the accountability, with the recovenanting approach. Churches that don't fall in line will be kicked out, and then they will be stripped of their identity and ability to even. I mean, they're strict enough. Their warning was you can't even use Unitarian, you can't use 7 principles, you can't use Universalist in any combination thereof. I don't think it would hold up in court because these are long-lasting, ideas and philosophies that have been around for a long time, and our churches have been around a lot longer than the UUA. But nevertheless, this is a precedent-setting move, and I'm so sorry you were victims of it, and you guys deserve better. But okay, Richard, that's my rant.
All I wanted to say was, well, I didn't want to cut any of this short because this was so fruitful, but we were supposed to have had a lunch break 45 minutes ago. Number one, a half-hour lunch break, and I'd like.
Okay, Richard, we can just go break for lunch from now until 45 minutes after the hour, and then we come back with a musical interlude, and we're right on schedule.
Exactly. Let's have lunch between now and quarter of the hour, and then let's listen to Leah for about 15 minutes, and then at 2 we'll be back on schedule with session 4, led by Dick Burkhart. Okay.
Thanks to everybody. Thanks for a very lively session.
Right
Thank you,
on.
Greg.
A quick comment. If we have more time before we end the entire convocation, I would like to volunteer to take over from Brother Reich's theory of the Trojan horse, because I think that's a very important topic for us to maybe end the whole session with, what the battleground really looks like. So I volunteer to do that if needed.
What time are we coming back into session again?